Hey everyone. So in this next video, we're going to be walking through how to post transactions, but do it in a way that it's more automated. In the previous video, we looked at how to post transactions manually, but in this video, we'll be walking through how to streamline and automate that process so it doesn't take up as much time on your end. So specifically, what we're going to be looking at is we're going to start off by creating different automation rules. So we'll be talking through that and talking through various conditions that you can create. Once we do that, we'll be walking through how to assign and exclude specific transactions based on those conditions that we set. And there's a number of different conditions that you can create. So you can kind of get creative with it based on your specific business. There's not going to be like a one size fits all kind of thing. And then once we do that, we'll review everything together. So we'll make sure that the transactions are being posted to the correct accounts. And then we'll also check the financial statements to make sure that everything is adding up correctly. So those are sort of the three steps we're going to follow. We'll start by creating these rules and conditions within these rules. This will help to assign or exclude transactions, and then we'll finally review those transactions. All right, so in order to get started, let's head back over here into bank transactions. And, from the previous video, we were kind of going through one by one, each of these transactions and deciding whether to match, categorize, or exclude these transactions. But if we wanted to automate this and create some rules because, maybe we have some transactions that are recurring or happen often or are from the same vendor, and we don't want to, manually categorize them each and every single time, well, that's where rules come into place. So there's a few different ways that you can create these rules. One way is to scroll down to a transaction. So if I look at uber.com, if I click this drop down here, I can create a rule for all uber.com transactions now. So I could do it this way. The other way is if I click this, not here actually, if I right click into accounting and then click into rules and right click here and click open link in new tab, this will bring up the rules engine. And then the third way of getting here, if you click into the settings icon and click into rules, it'll bring you into the same spot. And actually what I'll do is maybe have two tabs open. So I'll have the rules tab and then I'll have my transactions tab so we can work in both simultaneously. So let's just go back to that Uber example. So let's say I take Uber often and I don't want to go in here and have to categorize this transaction manually each and every single time. It should be there's Uber and then there's also Uber Eats. If I were to distinguish these, for any transaction that is just an Uber transaction, I want to categorize it to the transportation category or chart of account that I created. So I created one called transportation. Obviously you can use whatever example makes sense for your business, but in this case, I'm going to say all uber.com transactions should go to transportation. However, Uber Eats transactions should not go to transportation. Those should go to meals or something else. In order to set this up, if we head back here to the rules tab, we're going to create a new rule. So let's click new rule in the top right-hand corner. And for this one, in terms of the name, I'm going to let's just call it uber.com rule. And then the next thing it's going to ask for is whether this applies to money in transactions or money out transactions. So in my case, money out, because I'm always spending on Uber, not really receiving money from them. You can specify which bank accounts it applies to. I'll just keep it to all. And then whether this is an all or any type of condition. So what this means is we're going to set up a bunch of conditions here. So if all of the conditions are met, then only, assign or categorize this transaction or do something with it. The other option is you can select any, and then as long as one of these conditions are met, then go ahead and assign this transaction. I'm going to select all because I want to make sure all of my conditions are met. Now, in terms of the options for conditions, if we click this first drop down, you have the option of looking at the description of the transaction, the bank text, or the amount. More than likely, you're probably going to be using the description field, as that probably gives you the most, meaningful insight into what this transaction could be. The amount or the bank text, but the amount could be tricky unless it's the same amount every single time. Then possibly you could use the amount as a condition. Or I can think of another scenario where, you might use a combination of a description and an amount. So let's say and I think I had this here in my transactions down at the bottom, like Spotify, right? Like I have a $39 Spotify membership every single month or subscription every month. So I could say like if the bank text is or the description is Spotify and the amount is also $39.99, then automatically post this transaction. But let's say the amount was more or less, then don't post a transaction, create an error message so that I'm now alerted that like, hey, Spotify tried to charge me more. What's going on here? Probably a better example would be your telephone bill. If it's from that provider and a certain amount, perfect. Categorize that transaction. If it's more, it's probably something I want to look at to make sure that they got my charges correct. So that would be a case where you combine, description and the amount together. But anyways, in this first example, I'm gonna use just the description, and I'm gonna say for my Uber transactions, as long as the description contains Uber, and let's just make sure that makes sense here. If I go back up, yeah, as long as the transaction contains Uber, then post this transaction. However, the flaw in just using this one condition is that it's also going to post my Uber Eats transactions to the account that I specify down below. So I actually have to add a second condition. So I'll add a second condition by clicking add a condition, and I'll say description doesn't contain Eats. So what this is saying is as long as the transaction contains Uber, which is this, but does not contain Eats, which would be this, then post the transaction. So that means these Uber Eats transactions would be excluded from this rule. And as you can see, there's multiple ways of doing this. Like the other option is I could easily not add the second one and just say under description is exactly uber.com, because uber.com, you can see here, it shows up as uber.com every single time, whereas Uber Eats shows up as Uber Eats. So I could just do this as well, but just to show this with two conditions, I will keep this option. So let's go eat. So description contains Uber and doesn't contain Eats. And before we get down here to like, what to, in terms of what to do with this transaction or these transactions, you can actually click test rule. And when you do that, it'll show you like this rule will apply to 4 currently pending transactions. So if I go to my bank transactions and I actually search for Uber here, let's make sure that this is actually the case. So search. So you can see here 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see these 4 transactions. All of the other ones are Uber Eats transactions. So it looks like this is picking up accurately. So that's just a quick way for you to test that the condition is working. All right. And of course, you can add additional conditions as well. You're not limited to 2. You can keep adding them as needed. If you needed to delete a condition, you can just hit this trash can icon. Okay, so now that we've set our condition, what we can do next is now we want to decide whether we're going to assign or exclude this transaction. So in this case, I'm going to assign all of these transactions to my transportation expense account. So the first thing it's asking for is what type of transaction is this? Expense, transfer, check, credit card payment. This is an expense transaction type, especially based on the fact that this is a money out transaction. The category, so this is where it'll pull up the chart of accounts, and you need to select the appropriate account. So in my case, it's transportation. So here we go, transportation. And then you can specify whether it relates to a specific product or service. In my case, it doesn't. And then the payee. So it's not required for you to enter the payee, but it's always nice to enter the payee details if you want to track how much you've spent with a specific payee over time and just get some of that reporting. So you can see here, Uber is not created as a payee yet. So I'm going to go ahead and click add new, and it'll bring up the vendor card here, and I'll just enter Uber as the vendor. And actually, maybe what I'll do is I'll actually create 2. I'll do uber.com for this, and then Uber Eats for, even though they're part of the same company, at least it helps me to track the difference. So I'll just go ahead and click save. So now all of these transactions, the payee will be uber.com. You can do more here. If you click assign more, you can assign this transaction to a specific location. So if you have physical locations within your business, you can do that. But in my case, I'm going to keep it as is. And oh, the last thing here I'll just show is where you see here add a split, what you can actually do is you can split this transaction into multiple accounts. So let's say I wanted 50% going to transportation and the other 50% going to, I don't know, other expenses. I could, and I don't even have other expenses. Let me just select any account here. Here we go, entertainment with clients. So if I wanted a 50-50 split, I could actually do that as well. So I can get pretty granular with how I want to assign this rule. And you can split it even further. Like you can go 4 ways here. In my case, it's just going to be fully to the transportation account. All right, so now that we've done that, let's go ahead. Oh, last thing here, automatically confirm transactions. This rule applies to. So what this is asking for is like, did you want to, every time this rule is run, did you want to automatically assign these transactions? If not, then it'll require your review before you post these, which is fine as well, but it like eliminates that time savings element. So my recommendation is to go with auto add, especially if you're 100% sure that this is how it works. So let's go ahead and click save. And now you can see that this rule has been added. At any time, you can go and edit this rule if needed. You can change the conditions on it. You could delete the rule if needed. You can even copy the rule, which is really nice in case you had a similar rule that you wanted to create. But yeah, now you can see that this rule has been created. So if we head back over here to bank transactions, let's actually come back into the screen. Maybe just hit a quick refresh, because now we should see our Uber.com transactions automatically posted. Let's go to the posted tab. And there you go. You can see Uber.com, Uber.com, Uber.com. I must have had another one in there from before. But, oh yeah, right here. You can see this one was manually applied at some earlier stage. But you can see the 4 that have been applied here. And it says right here, rule, and then it's going to the transportation account. So you can see the automation around that, which is really nice. So if I actually open up my reports tab and I go to the profit and loss statement, I should see, there we go, transportation. If I click into this $62 amount, I should see all of my Uber.com transactions. All right, so let's maybe walk through one more example. Let's actually create a personal expenses rule. So let's say, for example, I think I have Netflix in here. So let's just search for Netflix. If you have like a recurring personal transaction each month, then you might want to set up a rule similar to this. And if you recall in a previous video, we talked about excluding transactions versus categorizing them to the personal expenses equity account or owner draws. So you want to make sure any personal expenses are, once again, categorized, but to that equity account versus being excluded, because if you do exclude them, then it creates a discrepancy or a variance during the reconciliation process. But yeah, here we go. Netflix every month. This shouldn't count as a business expense for me, so I want to set up a rule to account for it as a personal expense. So I've searched for Netflix. I'm going to click this drop down here, and I'm going to click create rule. And let's just call this rule Netflix. And it's a money out transaction to the primary credit card. That looks good to me. And if the description contains Netflix, then, do the following. So that all looks good to me. And then what we want to do here is assign it to, we'll keep it as expense, but we're going to assign it to the personal expenses equity account. So just search for personal expenses. There you see it, personal expenses equity. So I'm going to select that. Payee is auto-selected as Netflix. If you don't have that auto-selected, you could just click add new if needed. And let's just double check. Yeah, this all looks good to me. So let's go ahead and click save. All right, so as you can see, as soon as I did that, all of these transactions disappeared because that rule has been enabled. So let's actually double check this. So let's go to reports, standard reports. And then because I set up the rule to go to my personal expenses equity account, this should be in the balance sheet section. And if we scroll down to personal expenses, click into here, there you see all the Netflix transactions showing up. But yeah, overall, I think that's mainly what I wanted to cover for this particular video. I mean, you can clearly see like the benefits of going with rules as opposed to manually posting transactions. It does save you a lot of time. So what we looked at was how to create rule conditions, how to assign and exclude those transactions. And as you saw, there's a number of different conditions that you can create and a number of different rules you can create. And then we also looked at the review of those transactions and how they show up in the financial statements, or if they're excluded, basically not showing up in the financial statements. So yeah, I think that's all for this video, and I will see you in the next one.